Roguelikes are everywhere. And if you didn't get a chance to play a lot of them in the last few years, it can easily be overwhelming when trying to find the right one for you to start with. Luckily enough, roguelites and roguelikes are a subgenre, meaning that there are many different kinds of games out there that are considered rogue games, and finding the right one for you is almost always a certainty. So here's a list of my personal recommendations for people with zero prior experience who want to get into modern roguelikes and roguelites. If you're looking to play something quick and casual, then I'd recommend trying out a top-down single-level layout game. Instead of worrying about having to get comfortable with controls, strategy, and mechanics, these games are more focused on simple gameplay with very satisfying runs that get crazier and crazier very quickly without much effort. For this style of gameplay, my pick for starting out would be Brotato, a fun and simple game with nothing more but movement controls. Pick a character with drastically different attributes and mechanics from one another as if playing a different minigame between each character, pick a starting weapon and difficulty, and start the run. What I do enjoy in this game is how simple and approachable runs are. The movement is fluid and sprites are very distinct, allowing for some satisfying dodging between bullets and enemies. Items are easy to understand but have an interesting risk versus reward aspect to them, making the shopping phase engaging while also giving a quick breather between waves. If you'd like a bit more content and a sense of progression, look no further than the iconic Vampire Survivors. This auto-shooter roguelite is packed with content, such as many unique characters, levels, secrets, and much more. While this game doesn't demand as much thought into what to upgrade during runs as Brotato does, Vampire Survivor focuses more on the thrill of uncovering new and exciting content every run while keeping the gameplay simple but satisfying, all while listening to a killer soundtrack. Overall, the action tag reigns supreme in the world of rogue games, so there's a lot to pick from. If you want a generic but fun and simple game to start with, I might recommend Tiny Rogues, a simple top-down bullet hell game with a charming old-fashioned pixel art style. The game is easy to understand and doesn't require much skill, but is great at introducing newcomers to the bullet hell style of gameplay, with basic controls but a wide range of items, characters, and overall builds. Another great game is the classic Nuclear Throne, another top-down bullet hell with more of a focus on fast-paced action and overall chaos. While the controls are once again very minimalistic, its dynamic gameplay keeps the game from ever getting dull, with constant action and explosions making players feel powerful at all times. This game is a step up in difficulty, but also very accessible and easy to come back to. If you're looking for more of an adventure and more content, Dungreed is an amazing 2D side-scrolling action roguelite hidden gem. The action is simple but very fluid, with great enemy diversity, multiple biomes, awesome bosses, and a constant sense of adventure filled with many secrets. One of the best features of this game is its items. Almost all of them are unique, with really special abilities, especially when looking at the wide pool of different weapons that individually change the gameplay of each run. This game will feel like a true RPG experience when coming across these awesome items to add to your inventory. And of course, we have Hades. This game has gotten a lot of popularity recently, and for good reasons. Outside of having an impressive amount of content, fluid gameplay, great art and animations, the game has a heavy focus on the story and characters, immersing players and pushing them to go further and further to uncover more lore. Not to mention, with the insane amount of voice lines, each character feels alive and interesting to interact with. The roguelite elements will slowly push players in a steady rhythm and will give an awesome sense of adventure and progression, as winning early is close to impossible without upgrades. Each starting weapon is so different that each run will feel like a completely new experience, and the boons received from gods throughout runs will further create unique and enjoyable builds to play with each run. Traditionally, roguelikes are turn-based games, and while this genre has been shadowed quite a bit by the action tag, there are still many out there. If you'd like to try out a true traditional roguelike experience, I'd suggest looking at Caves of Quid, one of the few modern real roguelikes out there. An open-world, turn-based experience inspired by good old 20th century games such as Dungeons & Dragons, where players are free to do close to anything they want and explore this science fantasy RPG world. But these days, when thinking of roguelikes, traditional roguelikes aren't what most would think of. When looking at the turn-based tag, many people may recommend FTL for a slightly more modern approach to this genre, but I would actually turn to Into the Breach instead, developed by the same team. This puzzle-like strategy turn-based roguelike is simple in concept but is very strategic in practice. Players will choose from a wide range of possible mechs, each with their own abilities and gameplay, and will have to fight their way through hordes of foes by outsmarting the enemies while slowly adding new abilities and upgrades to your mechs and pilots. While each mission is only 4 to 5 turns long, each turn can be approached in so many different ways, making every decision very interesting. The diversity is honestly really impressive, and players are free to go at their own pace as well as their preferred difficulty setting. Each squad of mechs will come with unique achievements players can attempt to complete, which will reward coins that can be spent to unlock new, unique, and interesting mechs for future runs. The replayability is great and doesn't require much to get started, but will reward players for understanding and mastering the game's puzzle elements. Another yet more unique turn-based roguelike is Peglin, a game inspired by the game Peglin, where players simply aim to shoot their orbs and watch the satisfying results unfold while dealing damage to enemies. To my surprise, this game is also filled with content that allow many unique runs, resulting in a multitude of unique builds. It's a great mix of entertaining randomness as well as skill, with a lot of aspects to learn in order to climb the multiple starting difficulties. Each orb comes with a unique effect players need to adapt to, but will easily synergize with the multitude of interesting collectible relics scattered throughout runs that grant passive effects, resulting in some very satisfying gameplay. Another type of turn-based design has been seeing a rise in popularity lately: deck-building roguelikes. As a fan of these games, I find that the higher quality deck-building games can tend to be a little overwhelming for newcomers, which is one of the many reasons why Spire is such a perfect introduction to the genre. Outside of popularizing this kind of game, it doesn't have any unique gimmicks players need to adapt to, as it is one of the first of its kind, making it one of the easiest to start with. Fights tend to be fairly quick but still interesting, rewards are constant and exciting with many cards and relics, but one of my favorite aspects to the game is its balance. Every card is playable, which not only constantly enables new builds, but also allows new players to experiment without being punished by the meta so much. Even as an experienced deck-building player myself, I always come back to Spire and never get tired of it. Another great game is Monster Train. While more complex, the game looks more confusing than it actually is. In this game, players interact with 3 separate levels of a train, resulting in 3 different boards to keep track of. But this actually isn't as overwhelming as it may look. All 3 levels are rarely filled with enemies at the same time, and the action is resolved in an auto-battler manner, meaning once your units are placed, ending the turn will resolve each level's combat automatically, resulting in some fast gameplay and satisfying outcomes to watch. But outside of its original gameplay as well as interesting decisions to take in the out-of-combat areas, this game might have more content than any other deck-building roguelike out there. Before each run, players will choose a faction with a choice of 2 heroes to pick per faction, each with vastly different abilities, as well as also picking a secondary faction for a wide range of unique card combinations throughout each run. This by itself gives a huge range of possibilities right from the start of every run. Without even mentioning the relics and the ridiculous amount of cards each faction has, every run feels unique. The last deck-building game I'll mention is RogueBook. Its core gameplay isn't particularly complicated, similar to Spire with roguelite elements for a sense of constant progression and a fairly simple but engaging gimmick of playing 2 characters at once with a focus on characters switching places and positioning. An aspect I really enjoy is how unique the out-of-combat world is. Most deck-building games don't tend to focus too much on whatever is outside of combat, but RogueBook has a very interesting exploration part of the game where players will have to use their resources earned from battles to travel further and further in the uncharted board to reveal more battles and many unique rewards. This sense of adventure combined with great visuals, gameplay, and replayability results in a very immersive experience, a rare quality in these games. Lastly, if you happen to be a first-person shooter player, the options are more limited, but I'd probably go with Gunfire Reborn. While the roguelite elements may be a bit grindy at first, runs are very immersive, with multiple biomes, events, and bosses, as well as a huge variety of weapons and abilities that create a lot of replayability. And that's it for me. Once again, these are not my picks for my favorite games in the genre, but just ones I believe are good to get started with. If you'd like to see a list of my favorite Rogue games, feel free to check out my extensive tier list where I break down over 80 games and talk about the design of each one. Thanks for watching.
And gimmick to the game that I praise, definitely.